because there's a reason that the supply chains have been established the way they have, and these networks have become so international and reliant upon countries such as China. I think to question all of that, to flip the tables completely for short-term margin protection, is just the wrong way to do it. And I think instead what retailers really need to be doing is focusing on cost reductions where they can, getting their technology that supports their pricing strategies absolutely flawless, and their demand forecasting pristine. And I think those are things that they should have been doing all along.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Retail Remix. I've been thinking a lot lately about that quote from Lenin: there are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen. In the past few weeks, certainly, but also the past few months, it definitely feels like a decade's worth of stuff has happened. Tariffs, bankruptcies, strategy and leadership shifts, a veritable roller coaster ride on the stock market, egg prices going through the roof, consumer pullback, consumer stockpiling. The list goes on, and that's just in the realm of retail. Amidst all that, it's not a surprise if you might have missed one piece of news about us here at Retail Touchpoints. But the first hint is that you're hearing my voice and not that of your regular host, Alicia Esposito. I'm Nicole Silberstein, and after several years as an editor at Retail Touchpoints, I've taken on the role of editor-in-chief. As part of that, I'm excited to also be taking over as the host of Retail Remix as we kick off a new season brought to you by Big Commerce. With everything happening in the world, I've invited CI&T retail strategist Melissa Minkow as my first guest to help us all level set. So much has gone down in the past few months, much of it still developing, but the show must go on in podcasting and in retail. So today, we're going to dig into the biggest challenges and opportunities that 2025 has presented so far, compare notes, and consider the path forward. If the idea of taking a minute to catch your breath and assess the situation from a 1,000-foot view appeals to you right now, then don't go anywhere, because that's exactly what we're going to do. Welcome, everyone, to Retail Remix. We're very happy to be back with you, and we're excited to kick things off after our hiatus with a Retail Remix regular, Melissa Minkow of CI&T. Melissa, thanks for being here today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So why don't you start by telling the audience, those of the audience who don't know you, a little bit about yourself and what you do at CI&T?
Sure. So my background in retail officially started during my high school summers when I worked at Anthropologie on the sales floor. Just always important to talk about as a retail thought leader. I do have experience on the actual sales floor, knowing what it's like, putting all the clothing back, getting the stores ready for the customers every day. And then I ended up at Target. First 2 years after college, I was doing merchandise presentation specifically for Target Canada. So partnering with all of the buyers in Canada to make sure that the stores were organized and merchandised exactly how they wanted to optimize sales. Obviously, sales did not optimize, and Target Canada, rest in peace, ended up going away. But it was a great experience from, like a foreign expansion perspective, especially because I think a lot of people thought foreign won't be that challenging when it's Canada. But in reality, the big learnings were no, Canadian shoppers are actually very different from American shoppers. There were a lot of other learnings there as well. But then after that, I ended up at a market research firm doing consumer insights specifically for retail brands. I was doing multi-channel advising and marketing strategy advising for our retail clients. Did that for about 6 years and then ended up at CI&T. During that time, I also got my MBA and focused on market research and consumer insights there. So it was all kind of overlapping and just getting closer and closer to the consumer and understanding what shoppers are looking for out of a best practice path to purchase. And at CI&T, I basically do the same thing, just in-house. So I'm responsible for all of our consumer insights, market research in the shopping space. And CI&T is a digital technology specialist. We do all of the highly technical back-end engineering projects to achieve unified commerce. So we do website and application redesigns, we do data modernization strategies, anything that's needed for a composable commerce architecture, and we also do customer experience optimization. So my consumer research informs our go-to-market offering and also just what we're talking to our clients about to make sure that their back-end technologies support best practice customer journeys in the retail space.
My first job also was at a retailer at Gap. My favorite thing, and I didn't actually make any money because I ended up spending all my money at Gap.
Yep,
but I do
same.
agree. It's so great to like have that experience of an associate on the floor as you move into other parts of this industry. But what we want to talk to you today about is what you are hearing from your clients and what you're seeing happening more broadly in the retail landscape. And I think the first most obvious place for us to start is with what has become an everyday word for all of us, somewhat unexpectedly, kind of like supply chain during COVID, but tariffs. So what has been most striking to you about all the recent push and pull with tariffs and how you've seen retailers responding?
Yeah, I mean, during COVID, to your point, consumers kind of became supply chain experts, and now consumers are kind of becoming armchair economists, basically understanding what I don't think anyone knew what a tariff meant until the past couple of months, other than us. But yeah, I mean, I think what's been most surprising about all of this is just how destabilizing it's been for the retail industry. I think you never really know how resilient a category is until it experiences some turmoil and you see how it handles that, how it bounces back. And just how many retailers have made statements and then gone back on them in terms of the degree to which they feel they'll be impacted by these tariffs or these non-tariffs or what happens. There's just been so much change on a daily basis from these retailers in their stances and what they're saying. And I think it just kind of shows you who was prepared for something like this from the jump versus who wasn't. And I just don't think it's healthy or normal for an industry to ever be in such a constant state of limbo. And you have all these retailers kind of like holding their breath, kind of just awaiting the news every day. We as an industry should never be in that position. We should be so resilient that when this type of news comes in and it changes on the daily, we're prepared for it. So I just really can't believe that we still kind of have zero concrete moving forward plans from retailers as far as how they'll act on this. Like they're changing just as dynamically with their messaging as the messaging around these tariffs is changing.
I mean, to be fair, the actual reality of what the tariffs are going to be is also changing. And I think more than the tariffs themselves, it's the uncertainty around it that has been so destabilizing so far because a lot of it hasn't even taken effect, keeps getting pushed out or pulled back. How do you think retailers could have prepared for something like this too, especially because some of it is so unpredictable?
Yeah, that's a great point. And my advice or how they could have prepared is still how they can prepare now. I definitely don't think it's too late, but I do think retailers have been so far navigating this kind of all wrong, honestly. You hear a lot of retailers saying, in a reactive way, we're trying to overhaul our supply chains. We're trying to reevaluate. We're trying to revisit and see where we can bring it back domestically so that we're avoiding as much of these tariffs as possible. And I don't think that should be the response. I think that whatever ends up happening, because to your point, it changes every day, whatever ends up happening, where these tariffs end up sitting, changing the supply chain so dramatically is not an overnight occurrence. It's not something you can do even within the next 4 years. And to be honest, I don't see these tariffs lasting more than 4 years. And so to overhaul your whole supply chain for something so temporary that is not going to benefit your business in the long term, because there's a reason that the supply chains have been established the way they have, and these networks have become so international and reliant upon countries such as China. I think to question all of that, to flip the tables completely for short-term margin protection is just the wrong way to do it. And I think instead what retailers really need to be doing is focusing on cost reductions where they can, getting their technology that supports their pricing strategies absolutely flawless and their demand forecasting pristine. And I think those are things, so back to your original question, that they should have been doing all along. I think they probably felt previously that some of those priorities didn't have to be priorities because they were building out these supply chains and these extensive networks, and they were becoming really efficient in those ways, and they relied upon what they were achieving, and as a result didn't focus on data modernization as much as they could have, or they didn't focus on things like traceability with products. RFID got introduced so long ago, and then it just kind of screeched to a halt. And this is a prime time for retailers to embrace RFID once again and to really be digitizing your supply chain and getting all that data collected so you can make real-time decisions. So how retailers should have been prepared for it in the past is how they should now mobilize to prepare for it. Instead of trying to completely disrupt and change their supply chain, just tighten everything else in the meantime so you become extremely resilient and you have all this data at your fingertips and you can make real-time decisions better, but you're not necessarily changing all your vendors.
The other side of the equation too is how consumers are going to react, because retailers have been, to your point, some of them very vocal, changing their tune. It's a very confusing moment, and you always kind of have your pulse on consumer sentiment, but so far this year, consumers have been kind of hard to pin down. So on the one hand, we hear doom and gloom reports like the consumers are going to start pulling back on their spending because of all the uncertainty and because of kind of the panic in the air. At the same time, we are seeing some retailers record really steady sales, even increases, which is then being attributed to consumers stockpiling. Can you help us try to ascertain what the reality really is on the ground and maybe what retailers should be looking out for as bellwether signs of where things are headed for the rest of the year?
Yes, absolutely. Because I think this has been really confusing, is that a lot of people thought consumers were going to react almost as quickly, I guess, as retailers and right away pull back and stop spending. And the reality is, because these tariffs haven't taken full effect yet, consumers are hoarding. I think a lot of what we're seeing right now is so similar to COVID, actually, with, stocking up and just taking advantage where you can, when you can. I also don't think that's wise. I think the tariff surge pricing, or like these deep discounts that retailers have been offering to help consumers in the short term, while that's great, if they buy into less inventory now going forward because of tariffs, all they're going to do is end up with stockouts. So I think, again, what I've been disappointed in retailers with is just their very impulsive short-term reactions rather than taking a long-term stance. Whereas I actually think consumers have been a lot more long-term focused in this whole picture, stocking up, thinking, okay, I'm going to buy now, and then I'll pull back the reins in the next few months once I see the tariffs hit. So I think consumers and retailers, while it's been working for the economy the last couple months in the sense that, consumers are still spending, so retailers aren't being hard hit just yet, there's going to be a mismatch very soon where less product is going to be on the shelves and consumers are going to be pulling back. And so retailers are just going to be in this really difficult situation. When we deployed our connected retail survey at the end of January, we saw that 54% of consumers said that with the new US government coming in, they did feel that prices on most goods would go up. I bet you if we ran the survey now, which I think we're actually going to pretty soon, that would probably be like 100% of consumers would say that the prices on most goods would go up. And so I think, to your point, in terms of what's been confusing, consumers are still spending, but they're anticipating prices going up. It's just a lot of kind of hoarding mentality and kind of that spaving mindset for right now of spend money so that they can save later, get the deals where they can. They're taking more of a resilient approach than the retailers are to all of this. But I do think very soon we're going to see spending slow way, way, way down. And I think, that's kind of the perspective I've taken, is the market isn't going to slow down right away, but it is absolutely going to slow down. It's only a matter of time.
Yeah. It's striking to me as you talk how much similarity there actually is between the COVID years, which honestly it feels like it was eons ago, but was not that long ago. I mean, we're not to the point yet where there's no toilet paper, but and hopefully I don't think we'll get there. Yeah. It does feel like maybe some of the reaction is just a little bit of like post-traumatic reaction from the COVID years on both sides of the equation in a way. And I think maybe perhaps adding to that panic is the fact that so far this year, there has been a huge number of really high profile bankruptcies, big chains. It wasn't entirely unexpected. I know Coresight this year in January put out their expectations, and they already had said in January that store closures were expected to increase markedly this year, up from 2024. They're predicting something like 15,000 stores closing on the whole, up from 7,000 in 2024. Even still, though, like full-on bankruptcies like we've seen with big names, Party City, Big Lots, Hudson's Bay, Joanne, Rite Aid, Forever 21. I'm definitely missing a few even there. They must be kind of a blow to morale. What's your take on how all of this is impacting retail leaders' mindset and their strategic outlook, or adding or fueling to the kind of ethos that's out there right now?
Yeah, well, and your point about COVID is the perfect segue into this question because first and foremost, historical data isn't really accurate anymore when it comes to purchase patterns. This year is not going to be comparable to last year. We have such a different economic situation going on, which is also why I really harp on that data modernization and why it's so important to have your data in tip-top shape and have it cleaned and have it being organized in the right ways so that you can actually make real-time decisions and leverage other factors. Because I do think the most comparable example in our history is going to be COVID to what we're experiencing now. I also kind of think we could maybe look to Brexit a little bit and some of the fallout that happened overseas when there was kind of a delayed reaction of when Brexit was announced versus when it was actually enacted and the impact on the UK economy as a result. I think there's some similarities to what's been happening here with that. But otherwise, with COVID, the reason I felt that was a perfect segue to this question about all the bankruptcies is, if you recall, there were a lot of bankruptcies and closures happening during peak COVID as well. That was kind of the last time, so it would have been, 4 years ago, where we saw some retailers folding, and it just felt really dramatic then too. These typically do just kind of happen in waves, and the reason for that is something is the final nail in the coffin. At that time, it was COVID. At this time, it's the tariffs. So I think for Party City, I wouldn't actually necessarily say it's the tariffs, but for some of the other ones, I know Hudson's Bay has literally said it's the tariffs. So I think that this builds off. Forever 21 has been dancing with bankruptcy for a long time. So this is kind of more a nail in the coffin moment where then when something massive happens like this that is so impactful, it's undeniable that you kind of just have to fold at that point. Like you already weren't in a prime position. And then when something so impactful hits, it's impossible to survive that. So I think that that's really, what's going on here. Forever 21 is the one I have the most difficult time with. Perhaps it's because I'm a millennial, but I try to, push my own biases aside. The reason I just struggle with it in terms of comprehension is because there are so many other brands doing what Forever 21 does and succeeding, right? So, they even had that kind of partnership with Shein for a bit because in a lot of ways there are similarities to Forever 21 that Shein has, and there were kind of natural synergies. And yet, Shein has been able to survive. It for a long time was the #1 downloaded retailer app. Forever 21 just hasn't been able to stay relevant in the way its competitors that are such direct competitors has been able to. And I think that's challenging for me to wrap my head around because I don't see any real differences between how it operates versus how its competitors that are surviving, like Shein, like Addicted, are doing. So, I can point to certain explanations. Their stores were a total mess, but...
Isn't that perhaps an explanation in itself, though? Other companies are doing the same thing better, and there just maybe wasn't a need for them anymore. With all of these, they were also another one who pointed specifically to tariffs, but also to like Temu and Shein, these like Chinese direct startups as the reason behind the final nail in the coffin. And also to your point too, you could see this coming with a lot of these companies. Many of them, including Forever 21, had already been through bankruptcy.
Right, exactly.
So, it wasn't, I think the brands themselves that have folded are not particularly a surprise. And I think in many cases, it's not necessarily a blow to the system because to your point, like in the case of Forever 21 with Rite Aid, there are other chains also serving the same category and doing it well. The one exception that a colleague pointed out to me is Party City. There's not really a direct competitor doing what Party City was doing. And in that conversation, it really did remind me of Toys R Us. And that was another bankruptcy from a while ago that I felt was a hole in the retail ecosystem. And I still feel that hole of Toys R Us. And I wonder if Party City will leave a similar kind of hole.
Yes. Specialty retail is really tricky to understand in terms of what makes it successful versus what doesn't. Because with specialty, it's like there are other retailers who sell what they sell and they sell other things because they're not specialty. And so it's just kind of like you think of Bed Bath & Beyond, for example. It's tough because Party City has so many competitors, and yet to your point, they have none at all. Like, you could technically consider Etsy a competitor in some ways of Party City. You can certainly consider Target a competitor, Walmart a competitor. Amazon, dollar stores. I mean, technically, there's so many competitors. And then also to your point, there's going to be a hole there that no one can really fill. So because with specialty, there's both breadth and depth. And the convenience of Party City too just doesn't really exist with other retailers. So yeah, I don't know. And then Big Lots is a little bit of a puzzler to me as well, just because I know dollar stores overall have been struggling, but in the moment we're on the precipice of, from a retail perspective, I would think dollar stores will start to do well again, like discount in general. So Big Lots, right place, wrong time type of thing. Like I think if they just could have held on a little bit longer and maybe solidified their positioning and differentiation a little bit better, their time could have still come because of what I'm anticipating happening with the economy in the next few months. So just some interesting underlying stories here that I don't always think, I mean, bankruptcy doesn't necessarily have to be the end of an era. Like think about Topshop, for example. Now they're kind of coming back, you know? So it's interesting.
Well, and the new owners of Party City have promised stores. There's no details, but they said they are going to bring back stores. There are Big Lots stores that are coming back, much smaller footprint. But yeah, so it's not necessarily the end of the road for all of these companies.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think we maybe as an industry have to redefine bankruptcy a little bit. It's not a total death, right? It's like a partial.
Well, despite all of these headwinds, a lot of really exciting and interesting things are also happening this year. And we are going to talk about all of that next, right after a quick message from our sponsor. Okay, I don't only want to talk about negative stuff. So let's turn our attention to some of the more positive retail happenings so far this year. What have you found particularly exciting or interesting?
Experiential. I know we always talk about experiential. It's been, up and down throughout my time in the retail industry, but I'm seeing some really cool store openings. I'm going to butcher the name, but Prrento, like that store that just opened, went and visited that a couple weeks ago. Very cool. Saw the Skims store here in New York. I've been in New York for the last 2 months, and the lines, I know everybody talks about that from a cultural perspective, but it does really just show you that if you create a brick and mortar environment that is in demand and interesting, consumers will absolutely show up. There is interest and intrigue for shoppers to be in person. Actually, this is retail adjacent, but I always look at, QSR, food and beverage, and hospitality, a lot of other categories too, because there's just so much borrowing in retail and learning that can be done. And I went to this place called 12 Matcha last week. It was a 30-minute line right at opening. And they do so many things. They hired, I think it's the pastry chef from Noma to do their desserts, and they use charcoal to purify their water before they use it in their matcha. It's this whole artisanal experience, and the lines are not only out the door, but way down the street. And as I was walking over there, the line for Kith was way down the street as well. They were doing some sort of collaboration. So I'm excited about the future of in-person retail, just because I actually think, ironically, what retailers can do with digital has enabled not only a heightened demand again to be in person and be in brick and mortar, but also enabled more capabilities in physical stores to accommodate your consumer, to cater to them, to provide a really cool omni-channel path to purchase and levels of engagement that just didn't exist before.
Yeah, I agree with you. The Prrento store is very much a highlight for me too. We are, I'm sure, butchering the name, but we're doing good though, because the one thing I do know is you do not really pronounce the P or the S.
Good,
so
okay.
you don't say it it's not Printemps. Yeah. So we're getting close, as close as maybe Americans can. But that store really is a breath of fresh air. Yeah, it's a luxury department store, but it's in the financial district. That's an unexpected location. It is very welcoming. The price points might be too high. They were definitely too high for me, but
for me, yeah.
Everybody is still welcome there. And I think that's because they've incorporated hospitality into every area of the store. There's a cafe on the ground floor. There's a champagne bar and a restaurant on the second floor. There's a full service high-end restaurant next door. And I actually did get the chance chance to speak to their chief experience officer. And she talked to me a little bit about this idea that the store, because that store is a very historic legacy chain, one of the first department stores in France, but almost nobody in the US is familiar with it. And they really view their role as kind of like an ambassador of France to and French culture. The whole concept of the design of the store is a French apartment in New York City. It's definitely a must visit for me. Speaking of other bright spots, though, on the digital side, I would also add that I think the resale sector, the online resale sector, has been a real bright spot. And they obviously have a number of opportunities in this current economic situation. I've heard a number of them kind of touting their domestic supply chain. They, of course, have value proposition just kind of baked into their model. And I've been having a lot of fun seeing some of those platforms really kind of double down on those opportunities in the midst of this. EBay in particular is really making a play to be known as a place to come for fashion of all levels. So like high-end fashion, but also just like on-trend fashions. ThredUp is doing some really interesting stuff to kind of take this moment and make resell something that is more broadly available across the retail landscape. So that to me also has been a real bright spot.
Yes, I was actually, when we talk later about what's around the bend, I was going to talk more about sustainability and traceability and all that resale. So I definitely want to get into that. Two other things that I'm finding exciting: Sam's Club with the scan and go checkout. I have been such a stan of both Just Walk Out technology and scan and go technology because checkout is just so inconvenient for consumers. It's such a barrier, not only to entry, but to exit, right? Like sometimes I'll enter the store, I'll grab a bunch of stuff, and then I don't want to wait in that line. So I just abandon my whole cart in the physical store because scan and go isn't an option or Just Walk Out isn't an option. So that's been a bright spot. I think we're going to see a lot more. I know they own that technology, so it won't be that exact technology, but I'll be curious to see which other retailers start implementing scan and go and eventually Just Walk Out technology, because I know a lot of people challenge that one because of the fixtures and how difficult it is to keep it rotating with assortment. But I personally think it's the future of payments for a lot of reasons. So I'm excited. I think scan and go is the gateway drug for Just Walk Out technology in retail.
Yeah, that's interesting. I always thought Just Walk Out was really interesting too, but it's kind of fizzled, except for in specific environments. And I will say, when you're in those environments and you get over the barrier of like, oh, I don't understand how this works. It feels wrong. It feels like I'm stealing. After you get past that as a consumer, it is an absolute joy. I mean, if anybody's ever been to a trade show at Javits and tried to get lunch, it's a nightmare. It's like a 45-minute line, but Amazon has one of their Just Walk Out stores. And now that's all I do. I walk in, grab a salad, and I leave. And it's so amazing. So I agree. There's a lot of potential there. I think there's a big consumer barrier. It's interesting too that you mentioned Sam's Club, Sam & Go, because the next thing I want to talk to you about is retail media, which I think is also a kind of another strength in the retail sector at the moment. And Sam's Club, I believe it was Sam's Club, is incorporating their scan and go technology into their retail media offering as well. And so personally, I have used Instacart's Caper Carts at my local ShopRite. That's one that is coming out across a number of grocers, and Instacart is also integrating retail media into that as well, which as a consumer, already you have a more seamless kind of frictionless shopping experience. And what a great moment for a brand to then pop up in front of the consumer like, hey, you're walking by the soda aisle. Did you want to grab some Coke while you're here? So let's talk a little bit about retail media in general and what you're seeing really work there, because that does seem like another area of strength, I think, for retail at the moment.
Absolutely. And what you just mentioned is a perfect example of impulse shopping, right? And the big question, I don't know, 10, almost 15 years ago was, how will retailers drive impulse shopping online? That was a big challenge, especially because online grocery for US consumers has not been very successful. Even post-COVID, we kind of went right back to shopping in physical stores. And so if we're going to be doing our grocery shopping online, what does impulse shopping look like when there isn't a physical end cap to just grab your gum or grab your batteries or your magazine or whatever. Retail media is impulse shopping, is a way for retailers to drive that and also collect a different level of data at the same time. I think what's just been so interesting to me on retail media is the fact that everything is a billboard. Like, it just shows you everything is a billboard. I'm in a taxi the other day. There's the retail media on the, the payment screen. I'm like flying and there it is on my screen as I'm sitting in my seat and all I can stare at is the screen in front of me. I mean, it's everywhere, and it just shows you how much space brands have to broadcast what they offer.
Yeah, it almost kind of makes you wonder why we weren't doing this sooner, because all of these spaces already existed, or many of them, at least not the smart carts per se, but like the end cap, the screen on the plane for sure.
Exactly.
That's another really interesting area of this, is kind of the broadening of retail media into more of commerce media, where we're encompassing not necessarily brands that are like direct retailers, but they're adjacent to the retail landscape. So like payment providers, travel platforms, people like Uber, people like United, Travelocity. I mean, there's so much exciting innovation that's happening there. And then with these payment providers launching their own networks, integrating that with what retailers are doing. So like PayPal, and it's a really interesting, the way that it's evolving and kind of broadening both in consumer touchpoints and in players, I think is really interesting right now.
It's also, I mean, I know I keep talking about data modernization, but it also, again, begs the need for having the perfect, if you will, data strategy, because this is a whole new source of data that you're being fed, or at least you have access to as either a brand or a retailer or both. And so how are you merging that data that you're collecting through that channel with your other channels? It's just something really, really important to think about. And so I personally feel that the data aspect of it is an important piece of the evolution of this story for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it is an important point to harp on, because so much of the things that retailers can do today need that foundation of like a clean and well managed data set. And one of the biggest complaints right now, because retail media is still a little nascent, is brands just demanding standardization, measurement, KPIs they're used to in the digital landscape. And so you're absolutely right. You can't deliver well on a retail media offering without that very solid data layer as the foundation.
Absolutely. This also, I'm not going to say the store name again, just in case I butchered it in the first place, but thinking about, like you mentioned the hospitality component, people dining at that store. And it just makes me think too, I'll be very curious to see what their conversion data looks like as we talk about KPIs, because that price point is not in the cards at this point. But would I go there for lunch? Absolutely. And I would love to. And I think the experience would be amazing. So what does that data look like? How are they either separating or merging that with data from the shoppers who are purchasing goods there rather than having some caviar one day to treat themselves? I just think there's some interesting pieces there too. And it connects back to this idea of retail media and just retail touch points, like where are all your touch points as a retailer and how are you bringing them all together?
Yeah. And how are you valuing them too? Because I went and I did have a glass of wine. I did not buy anything.
Exactly.
But I still spent a little bit of money there. So
exactly. You're still a target customer, just a different side of the target customer. So it's just,
you better believe too, next time, if I'm in the market for like a $10,000 handbag, that is where I'm going to go to get it. Because I'm going to want that experience if I'm going to spend that money as well.
Exactly.
All right. So we'd be remiss if we didn't touch on AI before I let you go, which along with tariffs has become almost like a daily part of every conversation. What have been the most important developments that you've seen so far in this AI conversation?
Yeah, so I kind of compare it to the metaverse in some ways, because these were the two big buzzwords and ideas that retailers just got so excited about and tried to activate on immediately. For me, what's exciting and interesting about AI that was never exciting about the metaverse is it's very tangible in terms of how retailers can and actually have been in the past already leveraging AI to get closer to their customers, to provide more personalized experiences, to optimize their usage of data. I just think it's a much more realistic buzzword of a topic for retailers. Like we know generative AI, for example, is already being integrated into many search experiences for retailers, or retailers are now starting to think about how they can merchandise their websites according to how consumers are already organically discovering them when they're using something like ChatGPT to do their research of, I want to find a bunch of festival looks, where can I go? Something like that. So I think that's really interesting, is that the implications are so much more obvious with agentic AI and with generative AI and just AI in general than the implications ever were for previous eras of retail excitement. And also this kind of goes back to something you said before with like Scan and Go and Just Walk Out, and how some of the excitement fizzled and people just weren't talking about it for a while or implementing it. And the same thing happened with RFID, and now that's making a resurgence. This is how retail goes. It's like a concept gets introduced, people get excited about it, but they don't know how to implement it. They let it go, and then they pick it back up. And I think agentic AI and generative AI have allowed retailers to re-examine all their other forms of AI that they're already using and to kind of mainstream their discussions of it.
So are you saying that you think Metaverse is going to have a comeback? Because that one was one for me. I was fine for that to kind of fizzle.
So I was totally fine for it to fizzle. But that being said, I actually just saw, I can't even remember, it may have been you guys published an article about Roblox the other day and how was...
Well, Roblox is a powerhouse, but I think
exactly.
they've moved beyond the term metaverse.
Yes, I think it's not going to... I haven't been a fan of the metaverse, but I will say, do I think it's going to make a comeback in the way it was originally designed to? I actually do. I'm scared to be saying that, but I think now that time is passing, retailers are going to be figuring out what they meant to do with it in the first place. And it just kind of fits the cycle of everything old is new again in retail. And I think they will eventually find ways to make it happen.
I think you're right. I mean, there's a lot that's lumped into that metaverse term. It'll probably be a different term. It'll probably be more like virtual environments. There is still plenty happening in those spaces, to your point, with Roblox, but also lots of other things with virtual try-on and all sorts of stuff.
Well, and that's exactly, I think, what's happening here with AI. It's like retailers talked about AI maybe 10 years ago. It was a hot topic and they've been using it for even longer. But then once agentic and generative AI became these exciting mainstream terms, they could revisit it more openly and discuss it. But what to me is so interesting, I was listening to Diary of a CEO podcast, and he had 4 people debating the merits of agentic AI and just what it's going to do to humanity and all this stuff. And to make his point in the very beginning of the powers of agentic AI, he ordered water for his guests through an AI agent that he built. And that AI agent ordered the water for them through Uber Eats. And when I look at this example, I literally thought to myself, couldn't he have just gone on Uber Eats and ordered that water, and it actually would have taken less time and been more efficient? So what really interests me, going back to your original question about AI, is just where is it actually going to drive efficiencies for consumers? Like, does agentic AI actually make my life easier when it comes to purchasing, or am I having to put more thought into making a purchase in order to program my little agent and make it make orders for me? Like, how much faster is it really? I think that's where we're going to see the most developments. It's going to take a little while, but once consumers figure out how to actually make agentic AI work for them and retailers figure out how to build it into their models correctly, it can be very cool. I just don't think, the examples I'm seeing just yet are serving.
It's not there yet, but some of the things that are in development sound like they would really actually be time savers, like travel, booking and planning travel, reordering groceries automatically. There are some use cases that don't actually exist in the real world yet that I know that different companies are working toward, where I can see this being really an unlock. And I think what's interesting to me too, with agentic AI, but also just with generative AI as well, is if this does become mainstream and it becomes the way that consumers are connecting with brands and executing transactions, This is a huge shift that retailers probably should start to prepare. Like, how are we going to show up in these environments now? Because if it does happen and an agent is handling everything for a customer for their entire grocery shopping, then that means that the brand is no longer having that interaction directly with the consumer anymore. That's a huge thing to consider as a marketer and as a brand, how you're going to connect and continue to maintain relationships and loyalty in that environment. And to your point, it's not there quite yet, although we see it in search with Google's AI overviews. Brands are already having a lot less visibility and connection with, and this is brands across the spectrum, not just like retail brands. This is media brands like our brand. People are just getting their information directly in the Google search results page and no longer not linking out as much as they used to. They might not actually go to your site to transact anymore if Perplexity just completes it for you with PayPal, So this is a shift that brands, I think, should be attuned to and start considering how they're going to show up. When a certain subset, it probably won't always be everybody, but a certain subset of consumers, if this becomes possible, will start shopping this way, I do believe.
Totally. Well, and two things on this front. One, Amazon Dash and the Internet of Things long ago, kind of similar to agentic AI, if you think about it, with reordering groceries and stuff like that. So again, like everything that's old is new again, just different font. And then the other thing is, I think the implications for customer service with agentic AI are fascinating because, to your point, if it's just agents working with each other and the consumer is kind of taken out of it and the brand is basically taken out of it, who gets the blame when something goes wrong? I guarantee you it's going to be the brand. So if, for example, to use that Diary of a CEO example, the water showed up and it was the wrong water. I mean, he said pick the best water or whatever. But if he learned that the water was not the best deal or it wasn't the best quality or whatever, I guarantee you he's not necessarily going to get mad at the agent because we aren't at a point where we feel the agent is knowledgeable or capable enough yet. And also these agents almost act unbranded, whereas he may be annoyed with the CVS or Walgreens that he got it from. And it kind of goes back to when you order and your delivery gets messed up, even if it's FedEx or UPS that messes up, you don't get mad at them. You get mad at the retailer. So the onus is going to be on retailers to right all of these wrongs that result from agents talking to each other. And so that's why when people get nervous about what does this do to jobs and humans in retail, I actually think humans are going to be needed a lot more and in more elevated capacities because they'll have to be scrutinizing these transactions and making sure that the customer is happy so that the retailer doesn't get punished for it.
Oh, I always love a point that makes me feel like AI isn't just going to take all of our jobs. So thank you
I'm
for
an
that.
eternal optimist. Yeah.
Before we let you go, give us just like a quick peek into the rest of the year. Who or what are you going to be keeping an eye on? What topics do you think are going to dominate? Where are you looking now in the second half of 2025?
So I think the one word I would use for the next half of 2025 is pragmatism. I do not think this is a time for retailers to get crazy and risky. I think it's a time to think about innovation in the sense of being practical, being pragmatic, again, becoming resilient. That's not to say stop investing. I think a lot of retailers maybe heard tariffs and started to want to pull back their budgets. Not at all. The government is going to do what the government's going to do. The economy is going to do what the economy is going to do. And I think you still have to be smart and be resilient and prepare and plan and get your house in order. So I think pragmatism, I think smart investing is really important for retailers in the back half of the year. Look for cost reductions wherever possible. Use technology to help you find those. Going back to sustainability, I'm really excited about the second look that resale is getting. To your point, I think eBay's been doing some really clever stuff. They actually, my favorite show, Love Island, they were styling a lot of the UK participants over the last few years in resale looks. I think they've been really clever at making resale trendy and fun. And so I'm excited to see what more sustainable brands and retailers do, because this is a chance for consumers to care about sustainability in a different way. Like there's actually a reason to motivate them. RFID, traceability data, all that needs to be paid attention to again. And then lastly, I think subscription and member services like Costco, for example, they've been doing really well right now. It's a great way to accurately help you predict demand, to maintain customer loyalty, to save the customers some money. It kind of works really well with agentic AI too. Like you can just kind of put purchasing on autopilot. So those are kind of my like hot topics for the rest of the year.
I feel like we're going to have you back in 6 months
and
touch base on all of that. But I have to let you go now. Thank you so much for spending time with us today and really helping us get a handle on all these big, hairy topics.
Yes, happy to be here. So much fun with you always.
Your insights were so welcome, and they really, I think, helped us set the stage for this new season of Retail Remix, which is brought to you by Big Commerce. We'll have new episodes dropping weekly, and as always, we'd love to continue the conversation with all of you on LinkedIn on the Retail Touchpoints page. Be sure to stop by and drop your take on the topics we covered with Melissa today in the comments section, and also let us know who you want to hear from in future episodes. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you soon. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Retail Remix. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a future episode. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or your favorite podcast app. Until next time, keep mixing it up.